Andrew, whenever you talk to Silicon Valley people and you're asking, why are you doing what you're doing? The answer is, we're doing it because we want to make a better world. That's not quite the truth, is it?
No, it's a lot more complicated than that. Amazon says they do it for the consumer. Google says they want to make information free for everyone in the world. Facebook want to connect everyone. But of course, all those things benefit Amazon, benefit Google, benefit Facebook. So it's very convenient that they've all found visions of improving the world that in reality benefit them. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against the market. I'm not against private enterprise, especially remarkable companies like Google, like Amazon, like Facebook. But there is a very strong amount of hypocrisy in this world, where people are talking out of both sides of their mouth. Mark Zuckerberg is the classic example. He talks endlessly about connectivity, about making the world united. But of course, the reason he wants that is because he wants more people to join Facebook, which in itself isn't bad, but there's something very grating, very troubling, very irritating about that level of hypocrisy.
And we're actually working for them, right?
We're certainly working for Facebook. I don't work for Facebook because I'm not on it. But
you're on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter, and I don't mind working for Twitter.
Because what is Twitter better doing than Facebook?
Well, I think Twitter is a less creepy company. I think they're a little bit honest, a bit more honest. And actually, in the recent Snowden revelations, Twitter was one of the few companies that actually came out looking reasonable. They were always slightly more aggressive in pushing back the US government. I'm on Twitter because I have to be as a writer, but what I do is neither here nor there. It's not really an interesting element. It makes no difference. Even if I was on Facebook, it wouldn't make Facebook any better. Facebook, I think, is a particularly creepy company that plays this endless cat and mouse game with its users about the privacy of our data. Facebook wants us to broadcast our data because the more we broadcast that data, the more we tell the world what we're thinking, where we are, what our friends are, the more money they make. So I'm really troubled by the free model. I think it's failed. I'm not the only one. Ethan Zuckerman of the Harvard University, one of the original idealists of the web, calls it the original sin. And one very prominent security expert, a guy called Bruce Schneier, says that surveillance is the internet's dominant business model. So there's a growing recognition that the business model is creepy. We've become the product. Free really isn't free. It's turning out to be extremely expensive.
You said you feel troubled and Facebook is creepy. What do you feel more troubled, since you already brought it up, the data security issue, that Facebook has the data, or that the NSA or the GCHQ has that data?
Well,
who's more dangerous?
Who's more dangerous? It depends how you think about it. I don't think Facebook is dangerous in the sense that Facebook's going to arrest us. I think it's hard to compare them. I'm personally more troubled by Facebook because I'm a critic of the internet rather than a critic of government. I understand why the NSA needs to spy on us. I'm uncomfortable with it, and I think the NSA is excessive in its spying and dishonest, and has certainly broken the law in many ways. But I also understand that given the current state of the world, and the series of awful outrages in schools, in magazines, of people being gunned down for their faith, for their belief, we do need organizations like the NSA to maintain security and fight against evil. When it comes to Facebook, my problem again with Facebook is not that they're collecting our data. The problem is the honesty of their business model. I would like users to be a little bit more well, I would like users to recognize the reality of this transaction. I think we as users need kind of self-regulation. We need reality checks. It's convenient for us to buy into this myth of the free internet, of everything being amazing, of all this being done for us. And it makes us lazy, and it means most people can't really be bothered to get off Facebook or resist or fight or discover or demand new business models. I use Google all the time. I think Google is a remarkable search engine. Again, as a writer and as a social critic, it's almost impossible for me not to use Google. I don't have a Google account, though. I don't use Gmail. I don't, for the most part, use YouTube. I do use Google Maps, but what that means, I don't have the Android platform. What that means is that Google doesn't know me because I don't have a Google account. So they can trace me through my computer, but I haven't become, Google isn't able to join the dots on my online behavior. And everyone needs to think through that themselves. I think Gmail in particular is a creepy product. A number of people have said to me, why are my ads increasingly reflecting my emails? Now, Larry Page is not sitting there reading our emails. I know it's a little bit more complicated than that. But the dominant business model of companies like Google and Facebook is surveillance. That's how they've made their money. Google has a monopoly now on search, and the business model of its search engine is to give it away for free. And the more we search, the more things we enter into that box, the more they know about us. Eric Schmidt's made it very clear. He told the Financial Times his ambition was to know users better than they know themselves. His ambition was to know what we would do every day, what job we wanted, not because he's an evil totalitarian, not because he wants to control us. This isn't Big Brother. This isn't 1984. It's more like Brave New World, but rather so that he can build up more and more sophisticated customer profiles, which add value to the company as an advertising sales.
But what if the people do actually understand what's going on and they just don't care?
I think that's fair enough. I think if people genuinely don't care, they can do whatever they like. I'm very uncomfortable with some people's argument that they have nothing to hide. We all should have something to hide, and if you don't have something to hide, you're not having much of a life. And I wonder why people really would trade their inner lives, their movements, what they're doing and thinking in exchange for a free product.
Why didn't the people go onto the barricades once, like the Snowden revelations came out?
Well, I think they did. I think there was a lot of outrage. But remember, the Snowden revelations were as much about the NSA than they were about Silicon Valley. And they were complicated, and it wasn't entirely clear who was to blame. And people are, unfortunately, the internet culture in particular is making people lazy. We need a culture of responsibility. It's all too easy to blame the internet now for all our flaws, our problems, our social unrest. I don't do that. I'm not an anti-internet writer. I'm someone who argues that digital society isn't working. And one of the most important reasons for that is the inequality and the unemployment and the business model of the dominant internet companies. But having said all that, I don't blame the internet as such. I don't even blame these big companies. I understand what they're doing. They're for-profit corporations. I respect them for that. And I think that consumers, rather than thinking about the internet as this place of rights, need to think about it as a place of responsibilities. Tim Berners-Lee talks of calling, especially after the NSA scandal, for a Bill of Rights on the internet. I'd rather have a Bill of Responsibilities. So we've all got to grow up, from the Silicon Valley companies to internet users. We've all been living in this sort of fantasy land where everything appears to be a win-win, and as I show in my new book, it's actually turned out to be a lose-lose. I think even for these companies, ultimately it's not beneficial. I think in the long run meaning 20, 30 years' time, I don't think that the model that Google or Facebook is using is viable. So if they want to survive as companies, they need to reinvent their business model.
Travis Kalanick, Travis of Uber, was here yesterday, and he was like really very much emphasizing on how much jobs he's actually creating with Uber. In your book, you're stating the opposite.
I'm saying the opposite, and it's ironic. Travis made his speech yesterday at DLD. He promised Europeans jobs if they would let him set up Uber. And ironically enough, or perhaps not so ironic, the same day that Travis made his speech at DLD, a report came out, authored by Ed Balls, who's an influential British Labour Party policymaker, and Larry Summers, very, very influential American economist, former president of Harvard University, arguing that this new sharing economy wasn't really creating jobs. So when you become an Uber driver, you're not really employed by Uber. You don't have any security. This is contributing to what I call in my book a precariat, a new quote-unquote working class that has no security, even different from the proletariat in the industrial age, who even if they may have been kind of exploited in the factories, at least had jobs, at least knew who they were working for. When you become an Uber driver, you're not really employed by Uber. They don't provide security or health care. They even force you into buying a car, and there have been a series of strikes and demonstrations amongst Uber drivers in San Francisco against Uber.
Let me jump in right there, because you were mentioning the industrial age. It took a while until, like there was social security, there was like welfare and that. So isn't it a little bit too early to ask for all these like regulations now, since like things like Uber and so just came along?
Well, that reminds me of Chou Enlai, the Chinese statesman's famous remark when he was asked in the 1970s about what he thought about the French Revolution, and he said it's too early to tell. In seriousness, though, it's not too early to tell about the Internet revolution. We're well into the fifth decade of the history of the Internet, the first computer.
Not of the World Wide Web.
Well, the World Wide Web.
And the population wasn't really like using it.
The World Wide Web was formed 25 years ago. We're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, but the market share has not been up.
Well, let me finish. The World Wide Web is 25 years old. The Internet now will be 50 in 2019. But the difference is the speed of all this. Time has changed, and we have such speed that whilst maybe 25 years is not a long time in world historical terms, with Moore's law, with the dramatic changes in everything, with a huge amount of people online, with 50 billion connected devices by 2020, with everyone in the world essentially being online by 2025, I think we're at a point where the Internet is grown up enough, or at least an adolescent, to be able to make these kind of judgments. I think if we wait longer, if we say, well, give it another 25 or 50 years, it'll be too late. Because if Google and Facebook and Amazon become even more powerful, then they'll become like the corporations in the movie Prometheus. They'll be even more powerful than governments. So I would strongly disagree with the idea that it's too early to tell. We're at the right time now. We're at a time where it's becoming increasingly clear the structural defects of this new economy, that what it promised it's not delivering, but we're still early enough to reshape it to what we want.
In your book, you quoted I think, Oxford study which states 47% of the American people will be without a job in the next few years. So what are we going to do with the people?
It's a great question. If I knew, I would be starting my own company. It's the greatest question of our age. What are we going to be doing? And the problem with the digital revolution is it's not creating employment. It's creating very, very valuable companies like Instagram that sold for $1 billion and only employed 35 people, and WhatsApp that sold for over $20 billion and employed 55 people. But that doesn't guarantee employment. In my book, I compare those kind of companies with a traditional industrial company like Kodak that employed over 145,000 people. We're employed in these vast data factories. We're all contributing our photos to Instagram. We're all building their bottom line, but we're not paid. We don't have jobs. So this is something we need to balance out. We need to think it through. Firstly, we need to perhaps stop giving our free labor. And secondly, we need to analyze new business models that will create jobs. Because as you say, what are we all going to do? It's not clear. It's one of it's not one of the great questions. It's the great question of our age. How are we going to be employed in increasingly a network society where intelligent machines are replacing human beings, and the network has become a job killer rather than a job creator?
This is the third book, I think, that you're writing on the internet and like the downside of the internet, like you're criticizing the internet and the economy behind it. What was the worst thing that Silicon Valley people ever said about you?
Well, the most annoying thing is that I'm only doing this stuff to write books. So Tim O'Reilly has famously claimed that I don't really believe what I write, that I'm just doing it to sell books. So I think the annoying idea is that I'm simply an opportunist, that I don't care about these issues, that I'm a self-promoter, and the only goal I have is to sell books. The reality is that books, you know, even a great book like this with a wonderful German publisher, it's not a very reliable or lucrative business. I don't make much money out of writing books, and in fact, I can't support myself purely as an author. I do a lot of other things too, broadcasting, consulting. I have a couple of little startups of my own. So the idea that I'm an opportunist, that I don't care, that somehow I'm riding this for my own benefit is, you know, I'm a very thick-skinned person. I don't take it personally, but I find it very annoying and patronizing. I think people like Tim O'Reilly need to wake up and realize that these are massive issues and that it's important for people like me to actually raise them. And, you know, O'Reilly's supposed to be a progressive. He should be as concerned about this stuff as I am.
Andrew Keen, thank you for taking the time. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.